So let's continue our discussion of part two, or the second half of Full Metal Jacket. And I want to sort of think about all of the kind of macho posturing, the performance or front of masculinity that these young American Marines put on. And then I want to contrast that with some of the lessons that Joker receives when he is actually uh, sort of reintroduced to the front lines of warfare. So there'll be sort of a series of lessons, brutal lessons, life lessons about the reality of warfare that confront him or force him to confront the kind of artificial facade of macho bravado that the men have. So it sort of causes a kind of conflict in his identity and sort of shows us how brutal warfare actually can be. So we have a scene where Joker and some of the other Marines are expressing their frustration of being bored. They see that there's not enough excitement. They have no opportunity to sort of prove their masculinity, and they kind of are comparing or engaged in a kind of homosocial competition between one another, trying to sort of prove their worth as men, comparing their experiences of how long they've spent on the front lines of war. And Joker says, he wants to get back in it, into some dangerous situations. And the other men are kind of questioning his, bravado, or that sense of, masculinity, saying, well, you don't really know, you weren't even in it. You're not a true soldier, a true Marine, or a true man unless you have that 1,000-yard stare. Which is what men who have seen the brutality, the horror, the real experience gain this kind of emotional detachment. And the 1,000-yard stare is that sort of physical symptom of being and seeing too much horror on the front lines, and sort of the psychological effect that has on these men. So you're not sort of a true soldier unless you have this cold, distant stare or look in your eyes. It's kind of the emotional detachment of the stoic soldier. And so all these men are kind of peacocking, trying to sort of brag, and it's what I would say is an example of kind of military machismo. There's a lot of, sort of fronting or putting up this facade of toughness, and a lot of kind of rivalry, looking for approval, or kind of boosting one's reputation within this kind of homosocial, competitive kind of male hierarchy. So that's what you get a lot of that in this scene. And then once again, we have Joker using his John Wayne impression as a way to kind of subtly mock a lot of that macho-ness that he witnesses in the other Marines. So all of that kind of derives for him back to John Wayne as a kind of archetypal or stereotypical tough guy in popular culture. So he's sort of making fun of the way that the Marines kind of put on this kind of arrogant, tough guy pose or performance, and he participates in it, but he's also kind of makes fun of it at the same time. So he kind of straddles that line between being part of this patriarchal or homosocial male culture, and then kind of making fun of it at the same time. So he's kind of in that gray area. So we have a lot of talk, but then the threat becomes a little too real when it becomes apparent that they're not safe where they are. This is the Tet Offensive, which was a turning point in the war where the communist North Vietnamese attacked, the cities, the major sort of city centers, and the American consulates, and it was sort of viewed as a turning point of the war, shifting the emphasis or towards the North Vietnamese success, and then more and more sort of pressure on pulling out the American troops. So it became kind of apparent that this was, they were not going to win the war. So U.S. involvement would sort of steadily or gradually diminish from this point on in the war, and there would be more and more sort of less support for the U.S. involvement from this point on in the war. So it was a turning point, and the marking of a significant shift in terms of the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. But it was, it's sort of a shattering blow to not only the U.S. Army in Vietnam, but we kind of see this as a shift in the film as well, where we kind of get a lot more dark and brutal lessons about the realities of warfare. So Joker from now on in will sort of struggle in terms of becoming more aware of the realities of warfare. So he's only seen, a little bit of it, and he still has that kind of ideal or posturing of macho-ness, but he'll see the full sort of extent of the war brutalities when he is sent on a more dangerous assignment. So we'll see that in a series of kind of lessons, war lessons that Joker faces. So one of the first lessons in the reality, the horrors of war that Joker gets is when he meets the helicopter they're being sent over to do their new assignment. He's in charge of Rafterman as well. And they meet this helicopter door gunner who is, one of the more horrifying characters in the film. So this man is shooting out of the door of the helicopter at all of the Vietnamese people who are, that he can see on the ground. And he doesn't discriminate against one or distinguish one from another, so North Vietnamese from South Vietnamese people. He's just sort of killing them randomly. And it's a shocking kind of brutal reality of the kind of the mentality of the Marines, the American side, treating Vietnamese people as if they were, nothing, disregarding their lives and viewing them, as inhuman and not understanding the sort of full extent of, the lost lives, the civilian lives that they are taking. So this door gunner, he prides himself. He thinks he's an admirable soldier for accomplishing his death toll of 157 dead. This is a quote. He says, I've done got me 157 dead gooks and 50 water buffaloes too. Them are all certified. So he sort of prides himself. It's a point of pride that he has this high death toll that includes women, children, and he doesn't distinguish between a person and an animal in that quotation. So to him, they're all just targets and tallies, part of his growing death toll that he measures his kind of sense of pride or soldierly or masculinity. His identity is sort of determined by the height or the amount of his death toll. And Rafterman and Joker kind of watch in horror as this gunner just shoots indiscriminately anything, anyone who is moving or even standing still. So he's shooting civilians, women, children, and they're kind of horrified. Rafterman even starts throwing up in his mouth, just disgusted by this vision of what the actual warfare looks like. So it's there's this ideal that as a soldier you're there to serve, to protect, to be honorable, admirable, and then here Joker and Rafterman are confronted with just a horrible, violent, even sadistic person who prides himself on shooting and killing any living thing. So it's still part of that mentality that they learned in part one to become a killing machine. This guy is kind of the personification of a killing machine. And he is the product just as much as they are of this military mentality. And you get the sense that the dehumanizing of the so-called enemy is very much evident in this scene where women and children and any Vietnamese person is viewed as sort of an object, expendable, unworthy of life. So it is a very kind of cold, cruel, brutal lesson into how kind of sick or disturbing that military mindset can be when taken to this violent extreme level. So it is a kind of moment where Joker and Rafterman both kind of have their eyes opened to how brutal the reality of war is, and how they are participating in this system that degrades and dehumanizes a group of people. So that's lesson number one. Another lesson for Joker is seeing the mass graves. This is where the bodies of Vietnamese soldiers and civilians are buried. Their bodies are covered with lime, so that's that powdered white stuff, sort of to prevent the bodies from smelling. But these sort of mass graves where body upon body are buried is a visual horror that Joker is reporting on, and it is another sort of cold, harsh reminder of the actual deaths that occur, the destruction, the death that occur in warfare. And he's been kind of separated from that in his journalism. So here he is sort of put in midst of this scene where he witnesses the death for himself. So it's kind of this eye-opening experience. So this is another moment or lesson that he learns, the reality, the cruelty, the horror of warfare firsthand. And it seems as if, anyone he interviews, they just sort of want to become famous. So they are just see the death as a kind of point of pride, something that builds their reputation. So like the helicopter door gunner, and other sort of commanding officers that Joker interviews, they all just take the horror as a kind of point of pride. Their death tolls are, something that they look as a stamp of pride or symbol of their success, of their masculinity, and as a soldier. And then it's sort of divorced from the reality that human lives are being destroyed. And Joker seems to be, he's a little bit more jaded, a little bit more cynical, a little bit more sort of intelligent in a way. I don't know if that's the right word, but he is a little bit more cynical, I'll say, and aware that, being a soldier is not just about killing. So we'll see his duality